Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. Today I'm going to do a vlog on D.I.E. Die. What a strange term. We're talking about the new year and then I'm talking about death, but I'll explain. Many deaf people don't fully understand deaf culture, and I don't mean to blame them or say that they're terrible people, not at all. And nor is it your fault. It just happens because everyone has choices, whether they want to understand what it means to have a deaf identity and um, whether they're willing to look inside themselves and do the work to find out their identity. There's so many different ways to get there. Now, once you're in a situation, sometimes there's going to be conflicts or misunderstandings. So I'd like to suggest you use the D.I.E method. D meaning description. So, for example, you would go in and there's some kind of cultural difference. I'd say hold your judgment and put on that white lab coat and truly observe what's going on in a neutral stance. And hold your judgments until everything's analyzed. So, what would you describe? And by describing, I mean do not use any emotional words, just what you saw. So the next step, interpretation, I. Now this step means that what you think that person or that situation means. So what do you think is in their mind? Why did they come to that conclusion? How do they feel? And then the last one is E, evaluation. And at that point you would decide whether the actions in the situation are good or bad. So here's an example at Gallaudet University, at the deaf school, post-secondary institution, and a student's coming down the hallway, and there's lots of people chatting, and the one student takes out their cell phone and proceeds to talk on the cell phone in the presence of other deaf students. The deaf students are looking at each other and at the student, and one deaf student goes over to the student with the cell phone and informs them that that's not an appropriate behavior and that you should be texting or using Skype because that would respect the deaf space that's here as opposed to using the voice. The deaf student using the cell phone was taken aback, not in a judgmental way, but just taken aback. And then they left. Okay, so that would be a situation that's described. No emotional words are used during that scenario. Okay, so now let's go to the interpretation stage. So maybe they just felt comfortable enough in this environment to use the cell phone, or perhaps it's just something that they do every day, and so why would today be any different? They're just used to using it. I mean, whatever, you just use your cell phone. That's the world, that's their right. And for the deaf student to come over, perhaps they thought that, oh, well, that student thinks they're better than me. And there would be a little bit of a misunderstanding or perhaps a bit of an interruption to the conversation. Or perhaps even the college policies aren't clear on the relation to cell phone usage. So that's the many different interpretations you can take from many people's sides of view in that situation. So let's go to the last step, E, evaluate. I would caution everyone to not judge too harshly, but however, that situation, I'd say that perhaps the person was rude or perhaps they were not aware of the imbalance of power and the history. And so once the deaf student, yeah, you can evaluate the student's behavior as being rude. Or perhaps it was just their everyday experience to use their cell phones. And then the attitude of the deaf person coming to correct them was very harsh. And so, in a way, you can evaluate both of their responses. Or a third scenario where the deaf student with the hearing with the phone is their mind is open by the concept that they shouldn't be using the phone in the presence of deaf people. They fully understand that that is not appropriate and puts the phone away in an act that would respect all the deaf people in the environment. This is a complex issue, isn't it? And so I really would recommend that you would hold your judgment and go through these 3 steps before you make a flash judgment on anyone. It's always important to step back and look at the whole picture. And also, going through the steps would force people to go on a deeper level of thinking before jumping to conclusions and putting labels on people that they're terrible people or egotistical